I know Representative Gary Click, one of really the best in the country, of course in the state of Ohio, but across the nation. And yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to have Representative Click and Klopfenstein for sponsor testimony.
But there's no more local control than Bob and Betty Buckeye.
Well, that explains why he keeps saying, well, that's not the way Representative Click does it.
I'm not supposed to get emotional, but I am.
Then we sat down with Click to discuss his bill and the controversy surrounding it.
And the chair would like to invite Representative Click to present testimony.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The chair recognizes Representative Click.
Welcome back to What's Clicking with State Representative Gary Click. I'm Janae Myers, his legislative aide. Today we will be talking about the representative's recent Q&A at Cincinnati University campus. Representative, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was so exciting. David Niven, one of the professors at University of Cincinnati, invited me to take some Q&A from his one of his classes on government and politics. And David is a well-known professor. He's a commentator on things that are political. He usually approaches things from the left, but I'll just be honest, I was very welcome in his classroom. He was very kind, very polite, did not make it awkward at all, did not make it a partisan event, and had some great conversation with the students. It was a mixed class, I could tell partially by the questions, but also just by, the kids who just came out and told us where they were on the spectrum of politics. There were some conservatives. There were some that were more liberal in there. But it was really, I think, a good and a productive conversation with all sides. Nothing got too heated. Nothing got too hostile. And I enjoyed it, and I'm grateful for the invitation to be there.
We actually heard from one of the students in the classroom thanking you for just being nice and discussing the issues and not coming at it as a debate point of view, but as a
Right.
Q&A, just trying to get to know the students and understand what they believe.
Yeah, it was a very nice letter from one of the students, and I think he said I was the most conservative person he'd ever met. Certainly,
Yeah.
he said I don't think we agree on anything. He said but he said I was kind of surprised at how nice you are. And I think that's one of the things that is very important, is that we can have some civil dialogue, if I can be straightforward. Matter of fact, so as we are recording this, it's a day or two before it's going to get posted, and we just had a marathon session last night. In fact, we passed the Charlie Kirk American Heritage Act last night. It was
Yes,
a
we
beautiful thing.
did.
And I was talking to one of the Democrats who spoke, and he spoke against it, and he was very brief in his comments. But he was, he said what he said, but he was not distasteful in what he said. And I kind of admonished them a little bit ahead of time to say, hey, listen, I know some of you don't like Charlie Kirk. We do. And I think we all have enough character, Republicans or Democrats, to just realize that no one should die for free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And no one should have lost their lives. And so not too long ago, there were some Democrat legislators from Minnesota that lost their lives. And it was very tragic. And I said, listen, when that happened, we grieved with you, because the party doesn't matter when it comes to those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and they were honored on this House floor by everyone, respectfully. And I said, I'm hoping that you can do the same. And I have to give my Democrat colleagues credit. They did. They did. We've seen a lot of people go off. A lot of people say some nasty things in the wake of this. But they were respectful in that manner, about the bill being actually named in Charlie Kirk's honor. They're not fans of his, of course, but that has nothing to do with what happened, and they were not distasteful in that, and I respect that. And so sometimes on the floor, there was some rhetoric that was over the top last night, but it wasn't about this. And I think as much as we can, I've often said, let's debate the policies rather than demonizing people. And I'm not going to say that I am perfect at that because I get frustrated, but I always try to come back to that. If I get off track, I always try to come back to that as my core and as my base. And while we disagree on policy, I do have some friends on the other side of the aisle who are good people. They're nice people. We just disagree on some things. And when I say we disagree, I mean they're wrong.
Session on property taxes, which we've been talking just a little bit about.
Well, I'm very excited to jump into this podcast. I'm excited to hear what the students have to say and the way you interacted with them. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, let's give the folks just a slight warning ahead of time is that it's long, and so we're going to cut it into 2 episodes of the podcast. But if they just want to go watch the whole thing, we'll put a link because we have the unedited version available on YouTube as well, and they can just go there and watch the whole thing if they want to do that.
All right, let's do it.
Is anyone here ever thinking about running for office someday? I see those faces.
All right, there we go.
1 or 2. Very good. Anyone thinking about working on a campaign someday? Doing something like that? Okay, that's good. I think everybody ought to be engaged and involved. So I'm just going to give you a quick, real fast bio of who I am, what I do, and where I came from. I grew up poor. I grew up, my mom was on food stamps. She was a single mom, raised 3 kids. I grew up in Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. And my dad was an alcoholic. He suffered from substance abuse. Before he died, he was homeless. And after he died, I had to go. Basically, he finally got one little room, and I went to pick up his few things, and everything he owned fit into a little bag, and that was it. And so that was kind of a difficult way to kind of grow up sometimes. I remember when I was a kid, they didn't have the everybody talks about SNAP and the cards in. When I was a kid, we actually had booklets, and they had bills like a $1 bill, $5 bill, but it was food stamps. And I remember times when my mom would send me to the store to go buy a gallon of milk or something, and you'd have to go in, and you'd have to rip out the food stamp and get in there and get that. So I tell people this because sometimes people think, I can't do anything. I didn't come from money. Listen, my wife got me a sign put up next to my recliner. It says, I started with nothing, and I still got most of it left. And that's true. Most of my life, honestly, I have lived below the poverty line, raising 4 kids, in the profession as a pastor. Don't make a lot of money doing that. And so if you feel a need to get involved, and if you choose to get involved, don't let those circumstances tell you that you can't do anything, that you are not capable. Because you can when you set your mind to it, you can achieve great things. It doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what your background is, you can overcome. And so I spent most of my life as a youth pastor. I've been a chaplain for law enforcement and did that for about a decade. I was a chaplain for hospice, did that for about 3 years. And I've always been trying to be involved and give back to my community. And after a while of doing that, folks in my community came to me and started asking me to run for office. I didn't go looking for it. Now, eventually, you do have to sign your own name on the dotted line, but it was people who were coming to me saying, I think you would be good at this, I think you would be good at that. And so I prayed about it because I am a Christian, and I gave myself to that, and I put myself on, and the people chose me to serve in that office. I'm serving in my 3rd term. And most people, so I'm guessing probably most of you, you were signed to, you probably did some research on me, didn't you? How many of you did some research? Know anything about me? Okay.
Did the reading? Come on.
Come on. It's like, now who are you again? So most of the time, what you're going to see in the news is the most controversial stuff. And so I am known for being extremely conservative, and I am known for some controversial bills. And I'm not just known for them in Ohio, I'm known for them across the nation, for those controversial bills. But the reality is probably 90% of my bills are non-controversial. And the press focuses on the 10%, spend 90% of their time focusing on the 10%, and 10% of their time focusing on the 90%. And in fact, this year I've had 3 bills pass. All were bipartisan. I had a bill pass yesterday with a Democrat co-sponsor, Representative Humphrey, and it had to do with people who are leaving incarceration being able to get what's called a certificate of qualified employment so they can get back to work faster. I have another bill that I'm working on right now with Representative Darnell Brewer, also a Democrat, and to make sure that people who are getting out of what's called the community-based correctional facilities can get their driver's license before they get out, because, or at least a state ID, because a state ID is very necessary for the things that you want to do in order to prove that you've been rehabilitated. You want to go get a job, you want to even claim some of your benefits, you need a state ID. And so we are working on those. I did one about making sure that parents had access to their child's MyChart. That passed recently, very bipartisan, 87-6. And then I had one that's called Keith's Law, and it's a voluntary special needs database. Came to me, and this is what I really want to emphasize to each one of you today. Keith has special needs. He's an adult with special needs. Does anybody know anybody with special needs? Okay, almost everybody does. And there's been a patchwork of special needs databases in counties, but like Keith has high anxiety, and so Keith got pulled over one time and he was having a panic attack. They thought he was intoxicated. You might have actually read it, and so he came to me, he says, Representative Click, we met in a coffee shop. He said, I've tried to get people to take this in, nobody will pay attention to me. No one will listen. Would you do this? I said, I'll do this. And my joint sponsor, because we can have a joint sponsor plus co-sponsors, Representative Lorenz has a son who is autistic. And so he wanted to be a part of this bill as well. And so it's voluntary because no one wants to make anyone do anything like this. But now it's also statewide. So even if you're out of your own district and you get pulled over by the law enforcement, they can know, because there are high functioning autistic people who drive. But when they get pulled over, like Brian's son did one time, fortunately it was the school resource officer that pulled him over. He knew the situation, knew the family, called mom, put mom on the phone. They could talk through it, make sure everything was fine. In Idaho, there was a young man with cerebral palsy and autism, and he was having a fit. He had a knife, and somebody across the street saw this. And the family could have de-escalated. And by the way, remember, I was also a law enforcement chaplain for 10 years. And they called it in, and they said, there's a drunk man with a knife trying to stab people. So law enforcement gets there, and this guy was on the ground a little bit, and they said, drop the weapon, drop the knife. They started yelling, they had their guns drawn and everything. And he got up. Remember, he's got cerebral palsy. So he gets up, and he goes like this, awkwardly. They, in their minds, perceived that he was lunging at them. And you know what they did? Shot him 9 times, killed him. Now that is horrible for him, horrible for the family, but I want you to just for a second put yourself in the position of that law enforcement officer. Don't you think they wish they knew that information? Yeah, because for the rest of their lives, because law enforcement officers are people, the rest of their lives, they're going to remember, I shot an autistic child with cerebral palsy. And that's going to weigh on them for a long time. And so we put this in place. It helps the people with special needs, but it also helps our law enforcement officers to be ready to deal with things so they have the information when they arrive on the scene. So I'm going to stop talking about myself right now. I bet you've got some good questions, and I want to just entertain any questions that you have. We are recording this, and so if you got a question, David will bring you a mic, and I'll do my best. I don't know everything. There have been probably a couple thousand bills introduced since I've been there. So if you say, what about Bill 492 and the 135th General Assembly, I'm going to need more information. But I'll do my best to answer your questions.
All right, who wants to take the first shot? All right, sure, Matt.
What's been the most rewarding part of your job? Like anything specific that just you really love what you've done?
What is the most rewarding part? I'll just be honest, it's helping people. It is helping people. It was really cool, and I'll just go back to Keith's Law. Keith's just an ordinary guy with some special needs. not from a wealthy family. He's not a big, powerful lobbyist or anything like that. No lobbyists got behind that. But last Monday, we were at the governor's office, and him and his mom and dad were standing right there with the governor in the state of Ohio, watching a bill get signed into law that was his idea. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't a lobbyist's idea. But here's the cool thing, interestingly enough as well, is that people would come to me, lobbyists, high-powered lobbyists, and people that they'd come to me, they just come quietly and say, hey, thank you for that bill. I'd say, oh, you're welcome. I said, do you have something? Like, yeah. And people that I never knew, people who never came to me, it meant something to them. And you know, when I took this role, I said to myself, I want to have a name and a face for any legislation that I carry, somebody that I can say, this bill helps that person. And when I could see just an average, ordinary, probably lower, financially in the lower bracket of income, stand with the governor and say, we did this, that made me feel good.
Hi, I'm asking, you mentioned that Keith, went to you to get the bill proposed. What would you say is, the most effective method for, reaching out to our state representatives and state senators and, asking them about, issues in our community that we would like the state government to address?
That's an excellent question. What is your name?
Andrew.
Andrew, that's a great question. So people like me have events back home all the time. One of the reasons we have events back home all the time is because we want to get reelected. And so we'll have an event, we'll show up places. And whether it's the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, both parties have events. They'll have weekly or monthly suppers or monthly meetings. And so find out when those meetings are for whatever party your state rep is, or your senator is, or in your district, and show up at those. I'm a Republican, we have Lincoln Day dinners also every year, but we've got once a month we meet at Buffalo Wild Wings. And usually we show up there to meet and to give an account and to give an answer. And so show up there, but also go to the website, ohiohouse.gov. You can find us there. I will tell you, to be honest with you, some people are better at getting back than other people are. But if you can reach out and say, hey, can I have a meeting? Can I have coffee? Or I've got this idea. Now, I can't guarantee you that. I've had a lot of other people come to me with ideas that just are not workable. So I can't guarantee you that every time your bill's going to get done. But be persistent. Go to your county fairs. Find out, is my state rep coming to the county fair? And if they are, find out when they're coming. And, reach out to your local party as well and just say, when is this? I guess what I'm saying is there's multiple avenues. Go through your local party, go through the official outreach, go to their campaign page. Because we all have an official page, we also have a campaign page. Go to the campaign page and reach out as well. Multiple avenues, and sometimes it takes persistence. Thank you for that very good question. And by the way, before you ask, don't feel like you can't ask me a hard question or a controversial question, because I am not going to get offended if you ask me any hard question or a question you think is hard. Matter of fact, I'll be honest with you, I almost like those the best. But
Okay, well, first I want to say just thank you for sharing your vulnerable story with us. I think that's really it's really good. So I know you mentioned that you grew up on SNAP benefits. So starting on Saturday, over 1 million Ohioans will lose access to their SNAP benefits due to the government shutdown. And I know that's been a really controversial issue right now. What do you have to say about that? And are there any initiatives that will help Ohioans that are going to lose access to that? Is the legislature doing anything? I just want to know your views on that.
So that is a very good question, and that is not from that you're making it controversial, but it is controversial around the state. Can you tell me your name?
My name is Anna.
Anna, thank you for the question. So actually, that was a part of the discussion on the House floor yesterday. And I talked to some of my friends, some of my Democrat colleagues about this as well. They are asking us as the state to put money in to cover that. I oppose that, even though, like I said, because I come from that background. Representative Josh Williams also comes from that type of a background. Matter of fact, he was homeless himself. I talked about my dad being homeless. He was homeless, and now he's a state legislator, actually running for Congress. And he opposes us doing that. The reason is because I feel like, and this is going to be a controversial statement for some, but I feel like there are some Democrats in Washington, D.C. who are using poor people as pawns to push their agenda. And so all they have to, right now, what's been in front of them, and they've voted against it multiple times, is a clean continuing resolution. It doesn't have any partisan issues in it. It just says, let's continue the spending that we have right now while we continue to negotiate about the things the Republicans want and the Democrats want, and Chuck Schumer will not push his side, the Democrats, to sign that. They won't do it. And so I don't think it's appropriate for us to bail them out when they're using poor people as pawns. I think they need to vote for that continuing CR. And because anyway, it's usually the federal government that bails out the states, not the states that bails out the federal government. So that would be my position on that. But thank you for that good question. If you guys don't ask me hard questions, David's going to have to.
So I think it is fair to kind of look to the federal government as far as SNAP benefits, those sort of things. But if we're not getting a resolution now, I think it's also fair to assume that this is going to last for a while. In that case, do you think it might be useful then to start looking at doing something as the state government? Because I know you mentioned you were opposed to covering those benefits. If this continues for a while, that might be the only option. Is that something that you'd be willing to pursue?
So tell me your name, please.
Aiden.
Aiden? I'm going to maybe disagree with your premise, although and by the way, I think, and this is what I tell all my colleagues, I have a lot of friends on the Democrat side of the aisle, and I always tell them, vote your conscience. There's three things: vote your conscience, vote your constituents, and vote for the Constitution. Those are the three things that we've always got to consider. And sometimes they said, hey, I can't vote for your bill. I'm like, that's okay, you're still my friend, it doesn't matter. On this issue, though, I think eventually the pressure is going to come. I think the Democrats will sign a continuing CR, and I don't think we are going to have to be in that position to have to do that. But again, what we're doing is then we're asking Bob and Betty Buckeye. I mean, that's terminology. My friend on the other side of the aisle, Elgin Rogers, he always teases me because I say Bob and Betty Buckeye for the average Ohioan. And now he started using it. And I said, man, you've kidnapped Bob and Betty Buckeye. I want them back. But the average worker, so, I mean, the state doesn't have its own money. Government doesn't have its own money. It's your money. It's taxpayers. And it's the people in my district that work at Whirlpool. It's the people that work at Walmart. It's the people that work at Crown Battery. It's the people that work at Procter & Gamble down here and some of the other places. This is their money that they're being taxed for. It comes out of their paychecks in so many other ways, and we're going to take their hard-working money because certain Senate Democrats don't want to sign a bill. And I don't think it's right to put that on the hard-working people of Ohio to do that. And I will tell you, one of the Democrats I like in Washington, D.C., senator, in fact, I thought about dressing up like him for Halloween, because some people say I look like him a little bit. It's John Fetterman. But Fetterman says, this isn't right. We should not be holding up these benefits for our political gains. Let's pass this bill, then we can negotiate about everything else. So I don't think, I'll be honest, my side of the aisle will not do it. Even if I wanted to do it, the rest, they're not. And I think it'll get resolved in D.C. But I don't think it's up to us to bail them out when they can fix it just like that. It's a good question, though.
If I were able to follow up on that, I might point to what I see as kind of irresponsible spending or budgeting. I mean, we had, what was it, $600 million that were used to subsidize a new stadium for the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
I agree to an extent. I mean, it's the money from the voters in Ohio. But maybe this is a way to look at how we're actually using that money in the budget. It might be more doable at this point if we had kind of.
So I respect your comment on that, and you're talking about the money that was taken from the unclaimed funds for this economic development up in Cleveland. I will tell you this, I was not super passionate about that, but I also didn't necessarily hate it either. That wasn't a big deal to me one way or the other. Number one, we're using unclaimed funds, which is funds that's sitting there doing nothing, and we're using it for economic development. Now, first of all, I'm not even a football fan. I watch it once in a while. My wife is a football fan, but I married a girl from Michigan. I tell you, I found out you can take the girl out of Michigan, but you can't take Michigan out of the girl. So anyway, do we have any Michigan fans in here? All right.
Born in Michigan too, yeah.
You were born in Michigan? Where?
Lansing.
Lansing, okay. I grew up in Pontiac. Part of my time, could see the Pontiac Silverdome back when it was a thing. But anyhow, that is economic development. When we talk about sports, people get a different mindset. And people in Cincinnati had a different mindset because of the Bengals. But this is economic development, because what happens is first of all, that money, 3/4 of that money was already provided. This was the last quarter of the money that was going in to complete this project. This money will be paid back to the state of Ohio. It will be paid back with interest, and it will be an economic boon for that part of Ohio. It will very likely draw a Super Bowl. Now, forget the sports aspect of it. What does the Super Bowl bring into the state of Ohio? It brings in money. And there's also speculation and talk that WNBA, my wife loves the WNBA. My wife is very athletic. And we might be bringing in a WNBA team. And so, but don't think about it in terms of sports. Think about it in terms of economic development. So this is an investment that will pay back dividends. It's not just a donation. Who else?
Who else has a question? I'll ask one in the interim. For your Bob and Betty Buckeye, how well do you think this legislature represents the actual average Ohioan with respect to what that average Ohioan believes, what that average Ohioan, needs and wants and all that?
So I think the legislator represents Ohio extremely well. Now, here's one of the things they always talk about. How Congress, the favorability rating of Congress. Congress is always down at 11%, somewhere around there. But all of them keep getting elected. You know why? And it's because they hate Congress, but they love their congressman. It's like, I like my guy, I just don't like all the rest of them. And so in my district, I am very well liked in my district. I win easily in my district, because I am representing the values of my district. That doesn't mean everyone in my district likes me, but likewise, my Democrat friends are very well liked in their districts. And they are very well representative of, because remember the things I said that you have to remember, you represent your conscience and your constituents. Somebody says, you don't have to represent your conscience, just your constituents. Well, when I run, I tell people what my conscience is. They know what Gary Click believes. And so they vote on me based on, and now I have a voting record, so they really know what I believe and what I do, and they keep sending me back. So the reason they keep sending me back is because I represent them. And then, so we follow the Constitution, our conscience, and our constituents. So I feel like the people of Ohio are very well represented. And here's the thing, a lot of people say to me, 2 years, you gotta run every 2 years, that's horrible. It's like you're always on the campaign trail. Do you know why and the same for your congressman, you know why we have to run every 2 years? We are always on the campaign trail. I tell people I just campaign by doing my job. I just show up. I show up at events all the time. People actually tell me, they say, I've never seen anybody show up as much as you do. You show up and you build personal relationships with people. And that keeps us accountable. Now, when you have a longer time, like if you're elected for 10 years, you don't have to show up. Get elected, go do your own thing, and then about 2 years before you start to face re-election, or if you don't face re-election at all, then you never show up. Then you start showing up. So those short terms keep us in touch with our people. Can you represent all the people all the time? No, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what you do, whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat. And like I said, if you look at if you watch the things that get voted out, most of them are bipartisan. Not all of them are bipartisan. Some of them are very partisan, but the majority of the bills that come across are bipartisan.
Oh, all right, a question back there, but on my way to walking there, I'll follow up with, there seems to be, though, a gap between where the legislature lands and where the public often lands on ballot questions, for example. And
yeah, well,
so
and
you
that's
would
true.
think those would go in the same place if the legislature was that close to bottom line.
So thank you. That's a great response, and I appreciate that. You're a big deal, I hear. 6'7". What's this thing? 6'7". I just learned this thing. 6'7". Is that? Yeah. I don't know. Okay. I just learned it because I was talking to some high school students, and anyway, it came up. But why is there a difference on those? Because you realize any bill that I propose has to it's got to get screened. It goes through a filtering process. I introduce it. It goes to a committee. I have to go talk to the committee and say, hey, my bill's really great. Here's why. And then all the committee members get to do what you're doing. But I will tell you, they're not always as nice as you guys are. And they ask the hard questions about the bill. And then we have opponents who come in and proponents who come in, and sometimes what we call interested parties. They'll say, I like this bill, but can you do this? And we have people call us, and then what happens is sometimes we change that bill, we modify that bill in the process before we ever put it up on the floor. And then it has to go over to the Senate and goes through the whole same process all over again. If they change it, it's got to come back to us. So there's a filtering process. The problem with some of the ballot issues is somebody gets an idea, they put it on the ballot, on a referendum, and then they just spend a bunch of money on advertising, telling you what to think about it. We just passed a law to change this, but many times that money's coming in from out of Ohio, it's coming in from outside the United States. And they're spending money on ads and saying, here's what this is. And you catch a little Facebook ad, maybe you catch it on Instagram or somewhere else, or on your televisions. And that bill has not been carefully, or that referendum has not been carefully vetted, but somebody spent a lot of money telling you what it says, and it may not even say what they say it says. And you go to the ballot box and you think, well, this is what this bill is about, so I'm going to vote for it. And so it's really an uneducated process for most voters when it comes to referendum issues. All right, there's a question right there.
Sure. First of all, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us. Following up on the conversation we just had, how do you balance the needs of your district with the needs of the state as a whole? And is there ever a time that those don't overlap?
Wow, that's a very insightful question. I have not found a time when they don't overlap. So it's hard to say what I would do if they did. If my district had one interest, but the state had another interest, and I guess I would say that I always think what's good for Ohio is good for my district. And what's good for my district is what's good for Ohio. But you're right. Maybe there'd be a time that would come when I don't think those two are in sync. I haven't been there yet, so I'd really have to wrestle with that if that came. But that's a very insightful question.
Thank you.
That's what we do here, insightful questions. All right, who's up next? Jesse.
My name's Nick, by the way.
Nick, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. If you guys want to start with your name, that'll help me. Well, Nick wants credit. All right, make sure we get on video. That was Nick.
I first want to say thank you for being here, Mr. Click. In regards to your House Bill 486, the Charlie Kirk Heritage Act, why did you feel the need to introduce this bill with this title while the substance of the bill regards, quote, positive impact of religion on American history, is consistent with the First Amendment to the Constitution, the accurate and historical account of the influence of Christianity on the freedom and liberties ingrained in our culture?
Thank you for that question. I was hoping someone would ask something about that. So I love history, number one. And I didn't do well in history in high school, but afterwards it just became a passion of mine to read and to study history and to learn about our founding era and our founding fathers. And I have been frustrated because I know there are teachers who understand the positive impact of Christianity on America. For instance, the Pilgrims, they came over to America. That was literally a church that came over. If you stand in the rotunda of the Capitol building, you'll see a 12 by 18 portrait called The Embarkation. They are holding up Bible, and it says Jesus Christ on the Bible. They are knelt in prayer. On the sail, it says God with us, and then there's a rainbow behind it depicting the promises of God. But teachers, many teachers are afraid to teach that because they're afraid of places like the ACLU or Americans for the Separation of Church and State, places like that, who are going to come and file a lawsuit saying, you're indoctrinating and you're proselytizing. And I literally had a school superintendent tell me, we can't teach those things because it violates the Second Amendment. And that has been a frustration of mine for quite a while. And I think there's this thing called deconstruction out there. If you travel back in time, go back 75, 100 years in history, all of our history books talked about the influence of Christianity. For instance, many people think that the First Amendment, or separation of church and state, is the result of secularists trying to protect the government from the state. That is false. That phrase, wall of separation, started with Roger Williams, who was a pastor and a politician, who the state was trying to influence the religion, and they didn't like what he was teaching. They were going to ship him out back to England, and instead he ran away through the wilderness with the help of the Native American Indians in knee-deep snow while he was running a fever, and started Providence, Rhode Island, based on religious freedom. And then John Leland was a pastor who was against the Constitution because the Constitution did not have a Bill of Rights. He convinced James Madison to advocate for a Bill of Rights. And James Madison would not have been elected to the committee, the ratifying committee, without the support of John Leland, a pastor. And so Leland convinced him. He said, I'll endorse a Bill of Rights. And so then he endorsed him. And because of that endorsement, he won. People today say pastors shouldn't endorse. Without that endorsement, Madison would not have won. And Madison would not have been able to shepherd the Constitution through the ratifying process. And then Madison kept his word. And by the way, the very first people yell at me, say, you shouldn't be in politics because you're a pastor. Do you realize the very first Speaker of the House in Congress was a pastor? His name was Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg. He shepherded the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, through the process. And if you go look at a copy of the Bill of Rights, National Treasure, you might have to use some lemon juice to find a map on the back or something. And that's probably not even a popular movie anymore. But the top signature is Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, who is a pastor. But teachers are afraid to teach that, and a superintendent told me we're not allowed to teach that because it violates separation of church and state. Some people say, your Christian bill. This is not my Christian bill, it's my history bill. Should we remove part of history because it offends us, or because we don't like it, or because it might have a religious connotation? And the second part of your question was, why did I name it after Charlie Kirk?
I am so sorry to interrupt you all. I'm so happy to hear the questions from the students, Cincinnati. Also hear Representative Click talk about these important issues within Ohio. But it is time for us to end this episode. Listeners, if you want to listen to the rest of this episode without the edits, you can go to the show notes and go to the unedited version. But for those who want to listen to the next episode and hear the rest of it, come back next week and we will give you what you want. Hope to see you soon. You've been listening to What's Clickin', the official podcast of State Representative Gary Click, covering Ohio's 88th House District. That includes Seneca and Sandusky counties in Northwest Ohio. I'm Janae Myers, his legislative aide. If you would like to reach out to us, you can send us an email at rep88, that's REP88, at ohiohouse.gov, or you can give us a call at 614-466-1374. Thanks again for joining us for What's Clickin' with State Representative Gary Click. We'll be back again soon to let you know what's clickin' in Ohio.